Thank you for being with us early this morning, and thank you to my co-panelists at this panel discussion this morning. The two heroes or stars of this morning's event are, of course, Vaishali and Nitya, who have co-edited this volume with a stellar star cast of authors. Let me begin by posing the first question to not Vaishali, not Nitya, but the beleaguered minority, the man.
Actually, it's an amazing.
I'm collateral.
That's also rare. That's also rare.
Yes, this is a city of mammals, and but I must say ORF, at least the institution I'm quite familiar with, has tried to resist mammals, and resisting mammals is part of its DNA, which is good, but it's not always done in the city. Shombi Sharp, let me begin with you. The UN is the core institution, the UN family of institutions is the core platform, as it were, the core family that deals with sustainability, development, and the broader socio-economic challenges of our times. In achieving the sustainable development goals, the key concern, especially post-COVID and post the economic aftermath of the pandemic and, of course, the Ukraine war, has been that we have lost ground that we had gained on gender advance. Are you more confident after this year's G20 presidency and the outcomes agreed to that at least some of that lost ground can be regained fairly quickly?
Thank you, Ashok. And first of all, let me just say what an honor it is to be here on this panel with Nitya and Vaishali. And congratulations on such an important and timely publication, a thinking and doing book, as was mentioned in the presentation. On behalf of the UN system, it's an honor to be here. Apsab se milkar bahut acha laga, especially for the young people in the audience. I think that you're talking about the SDGs. And here we're focusing on two really important, confluence of two important streams. And the G20 and India's presidency of the G20 has really brought these together. And one is the broader SDGs, the situation we're in, the crisis that we're in. We see that only 12% of Sustainable Development Goal targets are on track. Fully about a third have basically come to a halt or are moving backwards. So we're in a very serious position, a very troubling position, so many factors. COVID pandemic, still the effects are being felt. A few people couldn't come to the summit because of COVID. So that's not finished, and we have to prepare for the next pandemics. India's played an important role in that and pandemic preparedness, and we can get into so many examples. India's presidency put the SDGs at the very center, and I think the Sherpa mentioned that. So much so that I've actually throughout been calling it an SDG 20, because truly, the voice of the Global South and bringing the G20 back from the precipice of collapse around political issues of East-West, but back to development issues. And G20 being an economic and primarily economic and financial kind of body. So that's been incredibly important, and this is really a strong fillip to respond to the Secretary General's call for SDG, rescuing the SDGs. And the timing is so important also, because this is reinvigorating multilateralism, this G20, and it comes 8 days before, basically in 8 days or 6 days from now, the world comes together in New York for the SDG summit to take stock of where we are at the midterm. And part of the G20 presidency has been delivering a G20 SDG Acceleration Action Plan and many other aspects that has been discussed. So it's truly important in that regard. Secondly, this G20, as the Sherpa mentioned, has brought more ambitious language and more focus on gender equality into the G20 process than has ever been there before. And this is so important. As the Secretary General says, gender equality is the unfinished business of our time. It is first and foremost a matter of human rights. I mean, no doubt about that. But additionally, as we see in what the G20 and what this publication is bringing, is that it's also about smart economics. It's about, we shouldn't, it's a rarity to be on a panel, as you mentioned, where, I'm not sort of a majority. And I try to think about, in economic terms, how to explain the importance of gender equality in terms of economics and production functions. That I have an economics background. And I said, look, there's a very simple concept of marginal product, right? It's very basic. Any production function, whether it's a household, a firm, a country, if you have too much of one input and too little of another, then the marginal value of that input you have too much of is very low. So when you're on a mantle of 8 men, what you're bringing, that special life experience and knowledge as a man, the value is very little, your additional input. One woman on that panel, her value is incredibly high. And so gender equality and parity is about getting to the point where we equalize the value, the marginal value that each of us is bringing to being in management of a company, in our households, or in our country, in the leadership, and this sort of thing. And so I'm diverging a little bit, but the great news for boys and men and boys in the room is that as we reach gender parity, your value goes up, your marginal product goes up. So it's truly a win-win solution. Thank you.
That's very well put. My next question is to Vaishali. Vaishali, if you look at the traditional determinants of what makes a modern society, access to energy, access to physical space, access to public transport, access to learning and education, there has been a clear discrimination between the way boys are treated and the way girls are treated, the way men are treated and the way women are treated. Why are you confident that newer modes or newer forms of such determinants, such as renewable energy as opposed to traditional energy, a field you're familiar with, or the digital space rather than the physical space, can be more equitable in offering access and agency to women?
But before I start, I just want to also, thank ORF and Nitya for partnering on this project with me. I don't think it's a book. I think it is an initiative. It is an initiative and an engagement for action. So really excited about it. And also thank you for being here and Shombi as allies, because I think what we're trying to do together is really cannot be done without allyship. So it's a great start, and I'm very positive about this long path we talked about in the film we just saw. And the journey, actually, I'd like to step back, Ashok, and say that, I think we should all take a moment and recognize the fact that we've come a long way. If you look at the 60s and the 70s, there were very few women who went to work. There were very few laws which even talked about parity. But the good news is our constitution is very supportive. I think Article 13, 14 really emphasize equality in all its aspects. And I'm very grateful to be a part of a country which has laws which encourage and recognize the contribution women can make. I'm even more excited about the fact that we had 100 scientists in the recent Chandrayaan launch. And it really gives me hope. And 25% of this institution have women as members of this project. And so if you look at data and facts, there's absolutely no doubt that there is any reason for women to stay behind. And if you look at the initiatives and the tonality from the top, as we saw in this G20, that it's clearly a priority for our leadership. And that's the good news. And again, very grateful for the UN and the SDGs. At least we have an SDG 5. But I also like to talk about the news which is not that good. That 7 of the SDGs don't have a mention of gender inclusiveness. Only 10 of them do. So if we look at all of these things, we've come a long way, but we have miles to go. And I'm so excited that that's an opportunity which gives us some work to do. So Ashok, to answer your question, when it comes to what are the new sort of, I guess, drivers, right, for, women to get engaged and help this journey, shorten this journey towards parity? I think the digital, and we have Klaus Schwab write in our book about the digital divide and how this is going to, the work around the fourth industrial revolution is going to make this transition more inclusive. It's going to make it more convenient for women to get to work, provide more flexibility, etc. Though, I'm a big advocate of the fact that men and women should use the digital conveniences equally, because, otherwise women will get left behind, because, work from home, etc. is all good, but I work in the private sector, and that's not necessarily good in the long-term interest. However, in the transition, it provides them the flexibility to prepare and to transition. I think I'm a firm believer of the fact that women need to step up at work, men need to, step up at home, so that we can ensure that the entire ecosystem is supportive of women to get to work. But definitely the digital sort of opportunities we have provide a lot of opportunities for us to do more. The only problem is that, and what I worry about, and the Sherpa spoke about the global south, that a lot of women don't have access to even phones or any devices which will help them get on to the digital sort of platforms. I was in Tanzania recently, and I happened to visit a Maasai community. And I think out of 150 people, just one person had a phone. And guess who that was? Yeah. Right? So, that's just an example of how long we have to travel to get to. Where as far as climate change, as far as renewables is concerned, I think it's a bottomless pit of opportunities, if I could put it that. Or, there's so much for women to do there. We have so many women in India, as we know. We have a lot of skilled women working in the black area, in the coal mines, etc., in the eastern part of the country. A lot of the renewables is in the western part of the country. There's an opportunity to reskill and get them across geographies if we can do that, but it'll require a lot of support and infrastructure, as is seen and as we all have to commit to, because you would need facilities and hostels and security, a lot of support system, I think, which the world needs to step up and provide to ensure that as we transition to get women to work, we provide them the support which is required, because in the past they weren't working in these areas. And we have to look at the world not only with the men's lens, where men go to work, but when women go to work, we need to broaden the ecosystem, provide for different facilities, and get the best out of them. And as Shambi mentioned, that we need to ensure that the marginal utility is not limited, but we can expand that. So back to you, Ashok.
Very good points, and I'm particularly taken up by, and I completely agree with your view that work from home is decidedly a double-edged sword for women, because it might seem very inviting and tempting, but it actually deprives them of very crucial agency if taken into a long-term future, and it is certainly not the answer for the problems we've been discussing. My next question is to you, Nitya. If you look at the issue of gender and of greater diversity in our society and workforce being institutionalized, if you look at, frankly, pathways to equality, you are really looking at a triangulation of efforts by governments, by the private sector, and by civil society. In a sense, the G20 process brings in all of these institutions and all of these different pillars. Is there a sweet spot? Can they actually work together? And what was the roadmap you draw for them? What is the roadmap for getting the civil society, government, and the private sector to work together?
Thanks, Ashok. And I wanted to add my thanks to Vaishali. Firstly, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks to RF. Thanks to the team at Renew. Thanks to Shambi and Ashok for being here. And above all, thanks to my friend and compatriot, Vaishali. It's been a great pleasure to work on this with you together. And as you say, it's a work in progress. It's a journey. And we're very happy and excited that all of you are also coming along. Ashok, to answer your question, I think that I think COVID-19 gives us a really good example of what it means to bring together these various parts together, the civil society, governments, the private sector, etc., to solve an seemingly intractable problem. And COVID-19 is an example of an exogenous shock that can affect society. And like all shocks, the people that are most impacted tend to be the most vulnerable. And in many cases, this vulnerability tends to rest on women and girls. And I think, the G20 as a fora can play, and as other multilateral fora, the G20 represents 85% of the global economy and nearly 2/3 of the global population. And this, I think, along with the multilateral system, the Sherpa mentioned that the multilateralism is back. I think it can really serve as a platform for cooperation, for standard setting, and for policy making. And I think that such bodies, at the risk of repeating myself, the SDGs are a call for action. They're a template for development. We have consensus on the SDGs, but I think that fora like this have two main responsibilities. First is advancing SDGs in their own territories, and secondly, also extending resources to other countries. And with respect to the SDGs, I think it's very critical to have a global plan to finance these SDGs. And this means a considerable overhaul in the international financial architecture to boost initiatives, particularly around debt relief, around green and inclusive recovery, and also things like the Bridgetown initiative that's spearheaded by Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados. And I think that investment in girls and women need to be prioritized. We need to come together. Data needs to be measured, because we can only have action on what is measured. And I think that, things like direct income support, support for unpaid care work, redressing the whole unpaid care work burden, which is very critical, and as well as support for the informal sector. These are all keys and the key levers, and these levers can be achieved only when society comes together as a whole, as has been demonstrated in the G20. And I think this is very key if we want to progress on the 5 Ps: peace, planet, people, partnerships, and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitya. I'd now like a deeper dive into the content and substance of the book. And I have one question which you can both interpret in any manner that you want. My question, I'll start with Nitya this time. My question to you, Nitya, is while working on this book and while working with the various authors who contributed to the volume you co-edited, what was the one surprise that came up at the end of the process that you simply didn't expect? One element that completely shook and surprised you, which you did not expect to have happened?
Oh, wow, that's a really great question. But just to retrace, for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at the book, we very much hope that you'd have a chance to read the contents. But the book we intended to, it posits itself as a debate around the main issues that women in G20 face and beyond. As Shombi says, we call it a critical thinking and doing book for those who want to transform society by moving the needle on gender equality. And, we've assembled this all-star cast of contributors from politics, from business, from society, to try to see how we can find solutions in creative and practical ways. And we talk about various elements in the book. But to your question about what really surprised me is, I think, a lot of the statistics, I think, for me was a really big shock. Because, for instance, we talk about digital literacy and bridging the gender digital divide. And we know in today's world, being connected to the internet and having digital skills are extremely key. And yet that's not the case for women and girls who don't have access to this. 9 out of 10 women and adolescent girls in low-income countries are not connected to the internet. Now think about what that means in the age of the 4th industrial revolution. These statistics are really shocking, and the way the world is going in terms of employment opportunities, in terms of employability, even though women are the majority of the world's university students, clearly they're not employable, or they're not being able to be retained simply because they don't have the digital skills to be able to be present and to be able to take part in the economic opportunities that the world currently provides. And the second point, very quickly, I'd like to mention is that the extent of male allyship. I think that we cannot do this. Gender involves men and women. And, men are an equal part of this. Women hold up half the sky, and so do men. So I think, the goodwill and the allyship of men is critical. And I think that was a theme that came out very strongly in this book.
Absolutely. Gender inequality is actually a male problem and a male-created problem. Vaishali, if I could move to you. You've been thinking and writing.
Do you want me to answer the surprise part? Because I thought you wanted
You
to
have an
bring it
answer.
to both,
Okay.
and then you can...
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sorry for coming in there. But I think what surprised me, Nitya, I'm sure you agree, is that both... So Samir, Nitya and I sat over a cup of hot coffee in Davos, and on the promenade, and samosas at the pavilion, at the India Invest Pavilion. And we were kind of talking about SDGs, Shambi, so we are advocates and supporters. And what is it that we should do? And so the idea of this project came up, and we were like, okay, nice to do. Many conversations in Davos went back. And then anyway, it became a reality. And both of us thought that we should have an ambitious program where we reach out to the most experienced men and women to not only talk about what is nice to do and what should be done, because I think the world is talking about it, but we wanted policies, we wanted action plans, we wanted experiences and how people have overcome their problems, solutions, because data, going through these problems, identifying solutions makes for good policy recommendations eventually. So we had a very ambitious reach out plan. And what surprised me, Ashok, to answer your question, is that we had a pretty high hit rate. There was hardly anybody who said no to us for this project. So I was quite impressed with that. I think the other part which was impressed and surprised as well, and the other part I think which was also surprising is that how, everybody came together to talk about the fact that I think we must really stop gender washing. Because I think that's a term I have created as I just speak, but it's really about having a lot on the surface but not beneath it, and we really need to work together to do more, to take action, to work with our respective governments, leaders in institutions, to just commit in a very sincere manner to what needs to be done, and that's not easy. That is difficult. It's nice, it's easy to sound good when you have gender conversations, but to get it done requires a huge amount of effort. And that's why when our team was talking about the long path, I was saying it's not only long, it's rather bumpy. And I think sometimes we don't necessarily recognize that.
Like a typically entitled male, I am going to shamelessly steal that term, gender washing, and use it and pass it off as mine.
Okay. As long as it has my copyright, I'm okay.
Shambi, I'll move to you before we move to the audience for comments, questions, engagement really. You've been in India for some time. You've seen the process of change, transition, development in India over the past few years and in the contemporary period. What has India got right in terms of pathways to equality? And where do you think there's still room for progress?
Thank you. So, yes, it's been sort of an amazing year and a half so far here in India. And probably the best part of my job is that I get to travel across the country, seeing the work, the great work that the UN is doing on the ground together with partners, civil society, business, government, at the village level, across all states. So I'm definitely getting exposed to the reality, what's happening on the ground. And one thing that I'm always consistently impressed with is when you get out to states and villages and you see that, people are taking action and they're not waiting around for, global multilateral kind of, that's very, very important. But people are taking action to move their communities forward. And oftentimes, more often than not, it's women, young women, women who are really taking the lead there. So this is an amplification of what's already happening. Now, I think just one example, an experience I'll never forget is doing a village homestay in the Ran of Kutch in mid to late May. So I don't know how many of you know here, that's a very hot time of the year. And that was actually with Vaishali. We have Atul here from UNEP. This was around a partnership that we have, Renew Energy, UNEP, Save a Self-Help Group organization, to help women transition out of the kind of the salt ban work, which is very harsh physically, this sort of thing, into the renewable energy space as kind of becoming solar engineers, helping to repair panels, things like that. And this is beautiful because it's also leveraging, taking advantage of the fact that India is investing so much. I don't think any country is investing more in renewable energy right now of all different sorts. And when you see the partnership between government leading, private sector, vibrant private sector as well, this is all coming together. And then we basically together, we're running a training center to train women how to transition into decent work. Later, actually fairly recently, I had the opportunity to go again to visit Gujarat and meet with some Seva women, some participants, graduates of that program. And I heard such empowering stories. One young woman from a very marginalized community graduated from the center, and after that was able to get a technical level job with a technology company. She was talking about how it was difficult. At first, her family wasn't really too keen on it because it was quite far away. I forget how many kilometers away. She would have to go out and, this sort of thing. Eventually, though, she convinced them to let her go. She's now earning a great income in a very decent job. She's investing in her family. She's helping her siblings go to better education as well. And she's putting away money to hopefully go to, I think, graduate school, something like that. So it's really an amazing story. That's what's happening right, is that you've got that kind of dynamism together with, as Sherpa was mentioning, so many truly important mission programs that the government has put forward. I mean, Bati Bachao, I always get that a little bit wrong, the word Mudra Yojana scheme, Vigyan Jyoti scheme. I mean, these schemes which are putting women in powers of leadership in small businesses, that are putting women into STEM education. India now has essentially parity in STEM education, which is truly remarkable because the global average is sort of 1/3. We still need to do more work about getting those women with STEM educated women into STEM jobs. But as you mentioned, Vaishali, the Chandrayaan-3, this is very exciting, and to see so many important scientists, women scientists in that process. We look at the COVID response in the pharmaceutical industry, so many important women scientists there and all around. We look at the SDGs. SDG 5, gender equality, is one of those SDGs in India that still needs much. We have still a long way to go, but we also see some of the most rapid progress, and we're moving quickly in the right direction as well. And just finally to say, it is about smart economics. So as we move towards gender equality, by 2030, it's been, I think Minister Smriti Irani has talked about, India alone could add $770 billion to its economy. And globally, we're looking at a potential dividend of $12 trillion. Who doesn't want $12 trillion? And India has an incredible opportunity, demographic dividend, the greatest youth generation in history. More young minds to tap. Many are in this room here, right? But that requires investing in the gender dividend as well. Absolutely, these are two streams that must come together. And it's so important to talk about positive masculinity, as you've said as well, because this is about a partnership. It's all together. As I always say, Saath hai to sambhav hai. It's Nari Shakti, but it's also allyship.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Ashok, can I just come in on
Absolutely,
one point
go
which
ahead.
I can't resist making? So when we talk about the additional $12 trillion plus which will be generated if we engage women in the workforce, I think we should be ready to perhaps lose even 20, 30, 40, 50% of this amount by letting men get out of the workforce, if that is required. Because that only when that happens can you have more women comfortably happily, with good mental health, engage in the workforce. I'm not sure if the world is ready, but I hope we can prepare many more men like yourselves and Ashok and many others who are in the room to be able to take that, bite that bullet. Because without that, I don't think we'll be able to do, at least women won't be able to do what they must do.
That's a very good point at which to move to our wonderful audience for some questions, comments, ideas, engagement.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone present here. I would like to thank the panel for this informative discussion. Like, coming straight to the question, while I was going through the G20 policy briefing, the exact title of the paper eludes me, but it was related to sustainability related to gender equality. My question is, in the present scenario where gender as a critically significant identity marker is evolving and expanding, there's a breakdown of the dual perception of gender. Will the present policy dialogue that is happening right now at all adjust such that the new conception of gender is also included? To sum it up, while there should be visible excitement about gender equality and gender justice in terms of what is being done to women, what about the third gender categories that are emerging?
Or seeing gender not in terms of a binary but as a continuum. We will come to that. Let me just bunch together a few questions. The gentleman straight, yes.
दो चीज़ें देखने की हैं. पहले तो सबको नमस्कार करता हूँ जितने लोग यहाँ पर हैं. सबसे पहले तो अगर आपने संडे का मैट्रिमोनियल न्यूज़पेपर कभी एनालाइज किया हो तो आपको पता लगेगा डिस्पैरिटी स्टार्ट फ्रॉम हियर. मेल की क्वालिफिकेशन फीमेल से ज़्यादा मांगते हैं, मेल की सैलरी फीमेल से ज़्यादा मांगते हैं, मेल की हाइट फीमेल से ज़्यादा मांगते हैं. वाई? तो ये डिस्पैरिटीज आएगी कहाँ से? शुरू होती है परिवार से. दूसरा एग्जांपल है, घर में खाना 100% नहीं तो 99% फीमेल बनाती है. जितने 5 स्टार होटल हैं वर्ल्ड में, सब में खाना बनाने का काम कौन करते हैं? मेल. घर में मेल क्यों नहीं खाना बनाते भाई?
That's a very good point. बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट है.
दूसरा जो मेरा कमेंट्स में चाहूँगा किसी भी पैनलिस्ट से, वो ये फर्स्ट पाथवे शुड स्टार्ट फ्रॉम द फैमिली. जितनी रेस्ट्रिक्शन लड़कियों पर लगती हैं परिवार में, उतनी लड़कों पर नहीं लगती है. लड़का अगर 12 बजे आता तो कोई बात नहीं, लड़की का 7 बजे के बाद शुरू हो जाता है. आई नहीं हुए.
Very good point, Dr. Ahluwalia. We will certainly.
So your comment, sir.
I promise you the panel will tackle that.
My name is Ritu Lakshmi and I'm a student at Miranda House, University of Delhi. And what I want to point out is that being a young adult or maybe a 20-year-old, and even in college, we work towards, in the field of gender, and we always make sure that, we talk about policy and gender, how we can, create a space where there is betterment of women and children in the society. So I really want to, I'm looking forward to your comment, ma'am, Vaishali ma'am, in this field where what can youngsters or young adults like us take the first step towards bringing a shift in the mindset of ours itself, because I believe that when we talk about gender equality and gender goals, the grassroots are the young people of India. So our mindset should change a lot in order to bring in the success rate or get women into different fields. When we talk about even if it's becoming scientists or more women in policy field or even in the private sector or government sector, whatever it might be. So what can we strive to do, or what effort can we put into in order to bring this progress as youngsters? Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I am Himani Agrawal. I'm a scholar at ISPP. I'm a student of public policy. My question regarding gender equality is that we talk about equality from the perspective that the men should treat women equally. But however, on my personal experience, I realized that the gender disparity starts by the internalization of patriarchy, the internalization of patriarchy within women. Adding to what Doctor said, that it starts at the family level. It's where they are grandparents, your grandmother, your mother. It's where it's all started. So it's I think it's more of an internalization of patriarchy.
We'll tackle that. Sorry, we have the final question here. Hi, Commissioner.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Mkanjira. I'm the High Commissioner of the Republic of Rwanda to India. Mine is not a question. I just want to thank all the speakers for their brilliant presentations. It was really insightful. And I also want to share the humble experience of my own country, Rwanda. After the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in my country, women were majority. So we could not expect any development if the majority of our population was left out. And that's why the Rwandan government decided amending our constitution. Today, the Rwandan constitution stipulates that in all key decision-making organs, at least 30% have to be women. And that's why today, Rwanda is a global leader in women participation in all decision-making organs. We do have 61.3% of female parliamentarians in my country, in the lower chamber. Thank you. And we do have 53.3% of female ministers. Wow. And we also have 49.7% of women in the local government administration. We are lucky to have a strong political will, especially from our president. So I feel blessed to have emerged in a society that has understood the importance of gender equality. What we have all to know is that all people, both men and women, have to play a key role in the social and economic transformation of their country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. Those are very impressive statistics. And in India, of course, in our Panchayati Raj institutions, in some states you have 33% representation mandated for women. In some states it's 50%. But in other institutions, in Parliament, of course, or in the civil service, or certainly in business, those numbers are not as impressive. But we've got a bunch of questions on what the state can do to mandate women's participation, on looking at gender not as a binary but as a continuum, and 3 questions really on the family. We've spoken about civil society, we've spoken about government, spoken about the private sector, but attitudes within the family as well. So that's a whole medley of issues and themes, but it's a good way to end this conversation, I think. I'd start again with Shambi and then move to Nitya and then to Vaishali to just respond to some of the issues that have been thrown up. Shambi, start with you.
Thank you. Let's see. I think, on the first question about concepts of gender and third gender and these sorts of things. I mean, first of all, again, in every country, these are complicated issues, but absolutely from the UN perspective, and I think from any true kind of student of human resource maximization, the goal of society is to be inclusive. And this is what we're promoting, inclusivity, maximizing the use of our human resources. We are all people first, and only after that are we women, men, third gender, non-binary, whatever you want it to say, and then we are Indian or American or, so many layers of identity. But we are people first, and we have skills, and we have vision and aspiration, and we have to create a society that allows every single one of us to be full participants, and we all benefit from that. That's so very clear. So that's at the core, and it's here in India. I mean, there's some very encouraging movement around the recent legislation on decriminalizing MSM and the third gender and these sorts of things. Long way to go for sure, as in many countries, but that's very encouraging. And we in the UN, of course, are doing a lot of work in this space. UNAIDS, UNDP, others are working in the space of helping to with gender-based marginalized communities to provide skills, jobs, employment, educate, these sorts of things in partnership with Indian entities. So, and again, just diversity is strength, bottom line, and that's something that India knows very, very well. I think in terms of the patriarchy and the change the rules at home, very good point. We talk about changing the world. We don't so much talk about changing ourselves. This is, that's where it starts for sure. And a lot of it is sort of not ill-intended. It's just misunderstanding or lack of information awareness. I'm reminded of some stories of kind of survey enumerators going to households and knocking on the door, and a man answers, and and they're kind of doing census work or something. And, oh, do you work? Yes, I do. What are you, a farmer? Ah, okay. Does your wife work? No, she doesn't. Oh, where is she? Can we talk? Oh, she's out back plowing the fields. Or she's doing, women are absolutely working and just not often recognized by our system. So it's about changing that and understanding that in today's world, women have shown that they can do absolutely, there is not an occupation on the planet. I mean, flying fighter jet planes, whatever it is, astronauts and things, women can do it. It's just about creating an equal playing field. What can youth do? I think one of the good news stories, I think, in today's world is that it's in a way never been, and maybe this is my, sort of bias, but it's never been easier for young people to create, inspire, influence from the comfort of the living room with social media, with all of the kind of technology and approaches, things like that. It's really the tools are there. It's about taking a step forward, getting out of your kind of comfort zone, and also to recognize that young people are much more powerful than we sort of imagine. And in the psychology of driving decisions, you can influence your family and your community much more than maybe you think or you're told that you can. So just do it. Many different ways to engage and to create the Jan Andolan of youth empowerment. Then I think just to say yes, and Ambassador, thank you for sharing that story. It's so powerful. I mean, it shows how we can turn tragedy and challenges into opportunities, and that's an amazing story. And I think every country needs to look to that example and apply those principles. Wherever I've seen, for example, let's say parliamentary representation, quotas or whatever we call it, we should have a minimum number of women or something, and people complain and, oh, that's, manipulating and things like that. I've never, ever seen a case where the end result is a lower quality of parliament. It absolutely increases. And what we realize is that it simply was not an equal playing field. And sometimes you need policy intervention for a temporary period of time until that playing field equalizes. And then we see the benefit of the results of gender parity. And just maybe last note on that, for example, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, when he came in, he said, look, we need parity. We need to kind of walk the talk ourselves. Deal with your own house first. So he said basically, we are going to have parity in senior UN leadership. So for example, look at the UN resident coordinators, the heads of UN systems across the world. We are at exactly equal parity, 49, 50, 51, whatever it changes. And it's been really a great boon to the organization. And there has been no loss at all. It's only gain. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. That's a optimistic way on which to end your remarks. Nithya, your thoughts on the medley of issues that came up. You could tackle one of them, any of them, up to you.
Thanks, Ashok. I'd like to begin with the High Commissioner's point, and I think Rwanda is a great example for us, ma'am, for the rest of the world to show what it means, what political representation for women means. In the case of Rwanda, it's directly translated into, we've seen reproductive rights, equal land rights for women. And I read somewhere how that, this land, women politicians have, and ownership of equal land rights in Rwanda has helped increase investments in land by over 18%, which was twice the rate of that of men. So really, I think Rwanda can show the way forward to the world. On the two other points, the one on gender, absolutely I agree. Gender is not a binary, it's a continuum. As Shombi mentioned, it's all about inclusivity. It's about taking everybody along, us as human beings. It's also about the intersectionality agenda, because gender is not only about sex, but also intersects various identities, caste, class, ethnicity, region, geography, etc. I also want to mention, actually, as a positive example, the new education policy in India actually has a gender inclusivity fund, which makes a provision not only for girls' education, but also transgender education. And they've particularly recognized that. It's a very enlightened policy, and it's something for all of us to take note of and for the world to take note of. And then finally, actually, absolutely right, the elephant in the room is actually changing social attitudes about women's roles in society. And I think one of the problems that causes gaps in gender equality is the whole issue of unconscious bias. And tackling unconscious bias is very key in order to move the needle on gender equality. What do we do to help get our biased minds get it right? And there's a whole arsenal, there's a whole toolbox now of innovations based on behavioral sciences, based on psychology, to close the gaps. And I think this is extremely important that we invest in our education systems so that we are able to have the tools and we're able to create a level playing field for everyone, starting at home and also in society, to deal with unconscious bias.
Thank you, Nithya. Vaishali, the final word is yours.
Okay, when you go last, you must keep it brief, and I'll try my best to do that, Ashok. But all great answers already covered by Shombi and Nithya very well. But Your Excellency, I want to congratulate you on the data metrics. After seeing the numbers of the representation of women at the highest level in Rwanda, I would say that our ambition there should be more than 30% for having women representation in some of the institutions you mentioned. I think it's so important for countries like Rwanda to speak louder, advocate more, because that's really where a lot of the work needs to be done. If you look at the global south, if you look at some countries in Asia and Africa, if we accelerate the work which needs to be done for gender inclusivity, I think the numbers we are talking about, 150 years, 286 years by World Economic Forum, for us to get to parity can be shortened, definitely. So I think we must all work together to get that done. And also tonality from the top is very powerful. We see that in India. I think our Prime Minister has really given a clarion call for not only women development, but women-led development. And that's a minor addition of a three-letter word, but means a lot. And I think when you have women in leadership positions, we can accelerate the transition, and that's what we must do. As the Sherpa said, we don't have so many centuries to wait around waiting for parity. It really disappoints, definitely my daughter, and I'm sure many others here, young girls. To the young girl from Miranda, it was a fantastic question you asked, and I just want to say to you that you have to believe in yourself. I don't think women believe in themselves as much as they do. And if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will, right? So that's the first thing to do. Be confident and be assertive and be ambitious. And as I was mentioning earlier, when we started working on this project, we were ambitious, but it's not like we didn't have obstacles. So you need to fight, you need to push. And don't worry about what others are going to think about you, right? We end up doing that a lot, and that goes to the question of what was mentioned regarding the family and the position of women there. Of course, it's not great, and we must change that. We must lean on, family members, but we must educate them as well. And sometimes when you do what needs to be done, I think others follow you. So we just need to believe in ourselves and follow our path. Our path to equality is what we try and bring out in this book. So please read it and learn from the experiences of people who've done this for 20, 30 years, it's quite an invaluable resource.
Excellent. And I would second that urging. Please read the book. It's got a stellar star cast of voices, of intellect, which will only add and contribute to our public discourse on this subject. Thank you very much, Shambi Sharp, Nitya and Vaishali, for giving me this opportunity to speak to you this morning and to have gathered all of us here.